Welcome into another episode of Locked On Phillies. Folks, it's gone from bad to worse. The Phillies have gotten swept for the first time this year. They no longer have the best record in baseball by percentage points. It's just, I don't know what's wrong with this team. We're going to have to figure it out together on today's episode.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. We come to you live as part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for checking us out today. Please make sure you're rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out on Locked On Phillies. You may know me from some of my other work if you want to follow me there as well. I do hosting on 97.5 The Fanatic, part of the morning show over there. Also 3 years credentialed Philadelphia Phillies media member and 3 years your host here on Locked On Phillies. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and you can use code, it's all in lowercase, LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. You should definitely do that. We could all use a pick-me-up because the Philadelphia Phillies, they've been swept out of their home ballpark by the New York Yankees after losing 6-5 today. It's a game that the Phillies felt like the better team for most of it, but Christopher Sanchez giving up a grand slam in the second inning and fighting from a 4-0 deficit was too big of something to overcome for the Philadelphia Phillies. And it's annoying. It's not typical, but it's become typical. All right, here's what we're going to do. And throughout this episode, we're going to get into some other stuff, right? We're going to talk about the trade deadline moves. I'm going to assess the moves that the Phils made yesterday right before 6 p.m., as well as the Austin Hayes and Carlos Estevez acquisitions. We're going to preview the long West Coast road trip coming up. It is not a time to say, okay, the season's over, put our heads in the dirt and just cry about it. Like, no, we're not going to do that. But there does need to be a attempted healthy conversation about where this really sets the Phillies when it comes to the chances of reaching their ultimate goal, which is winning the World Series. If you're not getting kind of cold feet about that at this point, I don't know how that's possible. If you think this team stinks, I also don't know how that's possible. The truth lies very much somewhere in between and probably closer to the they're still going to win the World Series conversation. But if you can say that with certainty right now or anything close to certainty, I don't really know how you're getting there because this team is in a really, really rough spot. This first segment, here's what I'm going to do. All right. As much as I've gone back and forth with people on social media, gone back and forth with people on the radio, gone back and forth with people in commentary on these episodes about how do you say this team stinks? You don't know what you're watching. This team's fine. This team's fine. This team's fine. There are things that worry me. There are concerns that I have. And sometimes just like all the greats, I'm laughing at calling myself the greats or one of the greats. But everybody gets in their head, no matter how positive they are about a baseball team, how much they believe in a team or anything like that, or any sports team. Like everybody gets in their head every once in a while. So put this part, the next couple of minutes of what I'm about to say, in one box. I'm going to put this in a box. I'm going to say it. I'm going to close the lid. I'm going to throw it away for a couple days, and maybe we'll come back to it this season. Hopefully we won't, because what I'm about to say is very critical of the Philadelphia Phillies as a whole. So this is a venting session. Hopefully you'll hear some of the things that are rattling around in your brain when you think about this team right now. What in the world is going on with the approach at the plate? Like, I know they can't change it. I know they can't, because if you change it, you start pressing. If you start pressing, you never come out of it, or you don't never come out of it, but it's harder to. But how in the world can you just have so many days of consistent non-production from the top of this lineup? It's too many good hitters to go cold at the same time. It just is. It drives me insane because it should never happen. It's part of the game of baseball. It's why I hate baseball, but it's also why I love baseball, because you never know. You never know what's going to happen. It's not basketball where if you give Joel Embiid a dunk, he's going to make it every single time. There is no go to the basket and get an easy point. Like, no, this is everything's hard. And some days everything's impossible. And you can run into a hot pitcher and it's over, a hot hitter like Jazz Chisholm was in this series for the New York Yankees, and it's over. And you just like, there's no way to really avoid that, no matter how talented the team is or how well you're playing. You can just give it a chance. But in baseball, everything's always a chance. And when the top of your lineup doesn't hit, you don't have much of one, which is crazy considering the Philadelphia Phillies have all-stars up and down this lineup, even down to the bottom, even where you're batting 7th and 8th. I mean, you're looking at guys potentially that are like Nick Castellanos or Austin Hayes, and those guys have been all-stars before, Nick Castellanos multiple times. Like, I don't know how it's possible that a team of this talent level has hit this level of a slump. That drives me insane offensively, while there are guys near the bottom that deserve fault as well. Like, the whole team deserves fault. Today, you had a skeleton crew lineup. Rob Thompson getting some guys some rest. I think getting mental reset days for guys, trying something different, trying anything to pull his team out of this slump. And it didn't work out. Obviously, the Phils lose, but I don't know. It's to me, it starts offensively with the top of the order, those big name guys, Turner, Harper, Schwarber, Bohm. And I know Schwarber's been really, really good at points during this slide, but I just mean, like, those are the guys that are supposed to carry your team. They have not been doing it lately for the Philadelphia Phillies. Also, the pitching, like I told you, well, you can go back and listen to an episode that I did ahead of the second half of the season during the All-Star break, where I said the pitching is what I see as the least sustainable thing for this team. Just because they've been so darn good, there had to be a natural regression. But Ranger Suarez on the shelf, Spencer Turnbull on the shelf, Taijuan Walker on the shelf. I'm throwing Tyler Phillips, a kid who looks like he just graduated high school. And he's been really, really good. Arguably your best pitcher over the past 3 weeks. Nola has been okay lately, okay-ish. Sanchez was okay today. Wheeler was awful last time, good the time before that, pretty bad the time before that. I don't know if his back's bothering. Like, I don't know what to make of it. You just don't get the consistent. It feels like, you know what? The offense feels like a car that you need to get towed to the shop. You just have no idea what's wrong with it. I don't know how to fix this. I need to bring in an expert. The starting rotation feels like a car that you have, that you're turning the key and the battery's trying to turn over. We've all heard that sound, that click, 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 click. And it's just like, it feels like it's right there, but it's just not starting. Like, that's what the starting rotation feels like. That drives me insane to see them go from where they were to where they are now, even though if it's a realistic regression to a mean, that drives me crazy. People mad at the manager. I don't get it, but I do get it, right? Like, I don't think Rob Thompson's a bad manager. I think he's a great manager. I think he's one of the best in baseball. There are very few guys that I would trade for as far as manager to run this team. But you got to find something, my guy. Like, you have to, the next couple buttons Rob Thompson pushes have to be pretty darn good ones. You're heading on a 10-game West Coast road trip. Your team has been floundering. They've lost 5 straight series. They've been swept for the first time. And there have been, like, this brings me to the final thing that I'll talk about. Like, the bullpen hasn't been great. You're getting new arms in the bullpen. We'll see what that looks like. I mean, we'll see what Carlos Estevez looks like long-term. He looked solid in his first action yesterday. We'll see what Tanner Banks looks like after acquiring him from the White Sox. I don't know. I mean, we'll see what the bullpen works out. I think ultimately they're going to be better than like you need them to be, which is all you can ask for. But Rob Thompson needs to push the right buttons emotionally with this team, and he has done that so much in the past. But there have been too many situations where it seems that the wrong guys are in the wrong spots. And the trade deadline, I understand that. We're post-trade deadline now. No more moves to make. We got to go. Like, we got to – no more Gregory Soto needs high leverage innings and then trade him to Baltimore. No. The guys that should be pitching to help you win games should be pitching. But you also have to balance that all with getting through 2 months still of the season without burning guys out. I don't know. It's the dog days. I'm losing my mind. And what I was saying, it brings me to that final point. I have seen so many more. Like, I think in this stretch more than any stretch over the past 3 years, I've seen so many at-bats that end in a 4-letter word or an outburst. I'll do it like – I'll say darn, but you just hear a swing and a miss from somebody and just darn, like loud as anything, and they don't say darn. Every once in a while, you'll catch those. When a guy's slumping, when a guy thinks he should have had one just on any given day, the Phillies have been having like 3 guys do it every time through the lineup. And it's different guys every time. It's Hayes, it's Harper, it's Turner, it's JT, it's Schwarber, it's Castellanos. Well, maybe not Castellanos because he never does that. But You understand my point, and that's a team that's mentally struggling. So I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. I'm going to put all of that in a box, though, and I'm going to push that off. And I'm going to say this team still incredibly talented. The only way you get through this, like, mental fortitude is going to be key to make your way through this stretch. You were close a couple games. Last night you lost the longest game in Major League Baseball so far this year as far as hours and minutes are concerned. Phillies went 12 innings and lost, had some opportunities. Today you lost 6-5. You almost staged a comeback late. I mean, it was better than the 14-4 that started the series. They just can't get one to fall right now. And we all know that feeling. If you played sports, if you golfed and your putter isn't working, if you're playing basketball and your shot isn't falling, anything. There's times where you just can't get one to fall and you're not doing anything different. You just got to keep shooting to get out of it. Well, Philadelphia Phillies have an off day tomorrow, and it's right back to it. And they're going to have to figure out something that works. Hopefully, they are the team I believe they are, because I still believe that this is the baseball team that I watched win a ridiculous amount of games over their first, I don't know, like 50-some, 60-some games. One of the best teams in baseball, basically from Jump Street to this point. And while they're not playing like it right now, when they get hot, I know how good they can be. So, like, I'm looking at this and I'm saying they got to come out of it. Like, they do. They do. But all of those concerns exist. So I put them in a box. I'm setting them to the side, just so you understand that I'm feeling the things that you are. And guess what? I'm going to soldier through it anyway, because I believe in this team. And I'm not saying you have to, but I'm saying if you did for 3 months and change of the season, you probably still should now. Coming up next, we're going to talk about the trade deadline acquisitions for the Philadelphia Phillies. We've talked Hayes, we've talked Estevez in individual episodes, but the Phillies made 2 more moves ahead of the deadline that feel a lot less consequential watching this team struggle, but still could be very consequential for the rest of the season. We'll discuss the trades for Tanner Banks and also a move that sent Gregory Soto to Baltimore. All that came down in like 10 minutes before 6 p.m. That coming up next on today's episode. Well, my goodness. Let's talk about Prize Picks, shall we? They're absolutely awesome. They're the title sponsor for today's episode, and they're America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. They've got over 5 million active members. Those are some strong clarifiers for an app. And if you're not familiar with Prize Picks, well, let me tell you why we are describing it as all of those things. Well, it's not like your normal daily fantasy sports app, right? It's the most exciting way to do it because you're not playing against other players. It's not like you pick a great lineup, but someone picks a perfect lineup, and the next thing you know, well, sorry, tough luck. No, all you do is you play against the numbers. You just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can watch the winnings roll in with Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 in a snap. Setting a lineup, incredibly easy. It takes 45 to 60 seconds. You can do it in less than a minute. Heck, you could do it in 30 seconds if you know what you want to do. It'll give you options for baseball players, for example, like hits or strikeouts or home runs. And if you see that number, you say, wow, I think Bryce Harper is slumping like crazy right now. No way he gets a hit today. You take less on his hit stat, and you just put 4 of those together. You can make a great payday on Prize Picks. And it's a fun way to stay engaged in the game, especially when the Phillies aren't keeping you as engaged as they have been throughout the year. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks, and you'll get a deposit match up to $100. You put $100 in, they'll match $100. You'll have $200 to work with. It's a great deal. It's a great app. It's a great way to stay invested in your daily sports with daily fantasy. So pick more or pick less with Prize Picks, folks. It's that easy. All right, well, let's talk a little bit of trade deadline, because while it doesn't feel like it matters now, here's what I firmly believe, right? I already told you. I told you all my concerns, but at the end of that rant in the first segment, I told you I'm putting those all to the side for the time being. Like, it's not time to hit the panic button. When I do hit the panic button, that box's lid will fly off, and I will have to deal with all the repercussions of those being actual things wrong with the Phillies. Right now, those are temporary, and I've seen more good than bad. But there may come a time where I'm right. And it has happened before, folks, believe it or not. where the Philadelphia Phillies are the team that they were before. This is a bad stretch. We'll laugh about it in 3 weeks to a month. Could you remember we thought the season was over after that sweep by the Yankees? Like, that's a very real possibility as well. And when that time comes, as I believe it will, we're going to then have to be like, well, how set up are we for the bigger goal that we've always had throughout this year? What did we do at the deadline to put ourselves in better position to win the World Series? And that question comes down to, well, not 4 players, even though the Phillies acquired 4 players. By the way, dynamite line by me. I set the line at 3.5 players acquired. I said they're going to get 4, and that is exactly where they ended up. Well, actually, technically, they got 5 if you count the 2 prospects from the Gregory Soto trade, but there's only 1 real prospect of note in that deal. But let's run through chronologically how the trades went down. So the Philadelphia Phillies first acquired Austin Hayes from the Baltimore Orioles couple of days ahead of the deadline. They moved Seranthony Dominguez and Christian Pache. Hayes had a 4 RBI night the other night in the extra innings thriller. He's looked pretty solid for the Philadelphia Phillies, especially in comparison to what you gave up for him. No prospects or anything. Solid. He sounds like your everyday left fielder. You have platoon in center field with Martian Rojas. Cool. You're better in the outfield with Austin Hayes than you were without him. Good deal. That's a pretty simple acquisition to evaluate. Also, you go out and get Carlos Estevez for 2 minor league pitchers, George Klassen, Samuel Algary, and you say, okay, 2 prospects in your 20s, solid pitching prospects that the Angels were very interested in and should have been, but Estevez gives you a guy that is a top-of-the-line back bullpen righty. He threw in the 9th inning last night. He looked pretty darn good. He gave the Phillies a scoreless inning to give them an opportunity for Rojas to score like that game-tying steal, I guess, or wild pitch scoring of home. So he was good, and he was used in the 9th, and that shows that maybe Rob Thompson will use him in an actual closer type of role. 1-run game in the 9th, either way, is still normally where you use your closer. Estevez is very good. You filled that role. Great. But you also moved Seranthony Dominguez in that trade to the Orioles for Hayes, so you're still at a net even, or I guess, yeah, you haven't really netted anything for the bullpen when it comes to acquisition. Now, you've gotten better because Estevez is better than Dominguez, but numbers-wise, you're still down a guy. So I was expecting the Phillies to do something else in the bullpen, and they did yesterday. They went out and they traded for Tanner Banks from the Chicago White Sox. To get that done, they traded William Bergoya. Now, we haven't talked about this one yet. William Bergoya, the number 11 prospect in the Philadelphia Phillies system at the time of this trade. People may hear that and say, wow, you went out and got a guy with worse numbers than Estevez for a higher prospect than the 2 guys that you traded for Estevez. Why in the world did you do that? And here's kind of the reason. Well, 1, when you go to the deadline, price goes up. 2 players in the 20s is almost as valuable as 1 player in the near 10s, simply because, I don't know, prospects are a crapshoot. If you get 2, it's 2 spins at the roulette table. There's only so much money you can win at the roulette table on 1 spin, depending on your bankroll, of course. But if you get 2, you take away more of the chance that you just flat out don't get anything at all and you lose your money. So I think the numbers kind of balance out on price. Also, Bergoya, second baseman, shortstop prospect who's blocked by Trey Turner and Bryson Stott. And if he was going to play third, Alec Bohm or Aiden Miller, whoever ends up the long-term player over there. I'm not mad at that at all. And you get a guy in Tanner Banks who's basically just a lefty specialist. But it's weird, right? His numbers are incredible against lefties. They haven't been that good against righties. They're not stellar overall this year, but they're solid. He's been around for a couple of years, so a guy that understands how to pitch at this level. You're not getting like a young, unproven reliever. But he's also a guy that could be a long relief guy or maybe even converted into a starter in the future. They've got years of team control on him, so maybe he becomes more of something in the next couple of years. This year, he's going to be a lefty specialist out of the pen, but if he's a multi-inning reliever, how does it work? Kind of a weird move. Felt like a Dave Dombrowski specialty guy. I'm going to trust Dombrowski on this one because I don't see the fit as much as I did with the other guys, but you could use another lefty that you trust. He throws strikes. He strikes guys out. That's something that the Phillies have had trouble with, is throwing strikes recently out of the pen. So basically you moved Soto for him. We'll talk about Greg Soto's trade in a second. I didn't really have a lot of faith in Greg Soto, so we'll call it an upgrade as well. we'll have to see. But Gregory Soto was then traded to the Baltimore Orioles for pitching prospect Seth Johnson, who was the number 8 prospect in the Baltimore Orioles farm system. You get someone top 10 from that farm system, you're doing pretty good. That's more of a future move because you're like, okay, well, we don't need Greg Soto. We might as well move him now before the deadline to make sure we have the spot open we want for Banks in the bullpen as a lefty high leverage guy. So all in all, a solid trade deadline. Nothing splashy. And it's funny. They did basically what I wanted them to do. Don't trade any huge prospects. Add a couple guys to make you marginally better. Tweak up a couple things that have been issues for the majority of the season, and they did all of that. So why is it that I'm still sitting here waiting for a big move, thinking, man, I kind of wish I would have seen that? I think part of it is watching Jazz Chisholm hit 4 home runs in that series against you and knowing that he was on the table. But I think as more time passes, I'll realize, okay, pretty solid trade deadline for Dave Dombrowski. Did what I wanted him to do, did what I think the team needed him to do, threaded the needle here. We'll see if he ends up, what's the result of threading a needle? Sewing something special? Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. I'm not a big sewer if you couldn't guess, but we'll see if Dave Dombrowski ended up hitting his mark with the target of threading the needle with this Philadelphia Phillies trade deadline. I think he did a pretty darn good job. I'm not mad at any of the moves at all. But again, nothing splashy. What this team needs to be splashy is to win. And coming up, we're going to talk about another tough stretch of the schedule that they have upcoming. And it may be time for drastic measures, folks. We'll discuss as we continue Locked On Phillies. Let's talk about Supply House, though, because you can get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades, supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info. Man, I can't talk. Product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts. You think I sell tongues so I can stop stumbling over mine? 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands, and you can get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. If they did, I'd probably have it by the end of this episode, knowing Supply House and their customer service. I mean, you need help with an order? You can get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business, and you get to talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining Supply House's Trade Master program. It's free. Supplyhouse.com. Check it out. Every trade master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM, and you can order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. All right, well, folks, road don't get easier for the Philadelphia Phillies, and emphasis on road. They have their longest West Coast, maybe longest overall road trip of the season coming up to start the month of August. Tomorrow will be the first day of August. We are going to look forward to, in tomorrow's episode, basically the 2-month final stretch of the season. See how tough it is, see how it matches up. We're going to see our buddies at Tankathon. We're going to talk to them about, well, I'm going to Google it, strength of schedule the rest of the way, so we'll have that conversation. But coming up coming up Friday. My goodness, feels like it's been a long enough week already watching this team. Phils are heading to Seattle to take on the Mariners, 57-52, a great pitching team. They'll play 3 games out there against Seattle, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. No rest after that. Monday, they're heading to LA, down the West Coast, to take on the Dodgers for 3 high-leverage, high-pressure, like star-studded matchups. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, all 10 p.m. too. So make sure you get your rest over the weekend, folks. It's going to be late nights here in Philadelphia watching those games. Last time the Phillies saw them, they swept them. Maybe they can do it again. How confidence-inducing would that be if you did that? And that's 3 more games. Then they get a nice Thursday off. Oh, wait, no, they don't. They're playing 4 against the Diamondbacks. And you know how the Philadelphia Phillies and the Diamondbacks history goes. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of next week will all be played in Arizona. I have some good news about that series. We'll discuss that in a second. But so you've got today off, and then you have a 10-game stretch on the road against 3 opponents that could be playoff teams. All over 500 by at least 5 games. Mariners over by 5. Diamondbacks over by 6, Dodgers over by 18, it looks like. It's going to be a really tough stretch. You're not playing your best. You've got guys banged up. This is kind of the make or break point of the – not make or break point, right? That's too dramatic. It's not like if they go out and they struggle on this West Coast road trip, all of a sudden they're not going to make the playoffs or not going to win the division or not going to have a shot to win the world. Like, no, that's not how this works. But it does feel kind of like this is where this stretch goes from, wow, that was really bad, I'm glad they came out of it, to everybody loses their collective minds. Like, I will not be a sane person if we come out of this West Coast road trip and the Philadelphia Phillies have lost like 7 of 10. Like, I will lose my mind. Some expectations for that stretch, I guess. You should be able to handle Seattle. They don't hit the ball very well at all. They do pitch very well, so it's not a great combination for where the Phillies are at right now, but maybe the offense will figure something out there. The Dodgers, if you get 1, I'm fine right now with the way they're playing. So that's what, 4 and 3 it would be. And then against the Diamondbacks, I think you're a significantly better team than them, just like you were last year. Maybe the Diamondbacks are the team they need to see to snap them out of this and remind them, hey, you remember what happened last time you went through a slump like this? It cost you dearly. Let's wake up. So split with the Diamondbacks, 3 of 4 from the Diamondbacks. Either way, they should be able to find – they should be able to find 5 wins on this road trip, right? The base level expectation is to go 500 on the West Coast. Anything less than that, it's a bad stretch continuing. Anything better than that, they're coming out of it. So that's the good evaluation. The bad evaluation is this is about as bad of a time to be away from your home ballpark where you've played so much better. I don't know. Like, today the lineup came out for the Phillies and had guys like Rojas and Stubbs and Edmundo Sosa, and I'm not coming at any of those individual players, but it was one of those like get everybody rest lineups. And I was like, hey, let's get nuts. Who knows? The regular guys aren't working. Like, normal lineups aren't working. Nothing's working. Let's try everything. It might sound dumb to say heading out on the road might be a good thing for this baseball team, but I'm willing to try anything at this point. Heading out on the road might be a good thing for this baseball team. They might need that long West Coast road trip where they just go out there and they're not with family. They're not in their own beds. I'm not saying like exile these guys, but I'm saying it may be time for them to just, I don't know, have a change of scenery, not do the same, okay, back to Citizens Bank Park every series or every other series type of thing, and just lock in, do what you can, come back a different team. I can see the part of the video yearbook now. Yeah, we were scuffling there, but everything changed when we headed to the West Coast. Like, that's what's in my mind as I see this. Or it could be, man, we imploded out there. This video yearbook stinks. Everyone's mad at us because we choked away one of the great seasons in Phillies history. It could go either way. But that's the fun of sports, isn't it? I use that fun very, very lightly. Like, folks, I wish I had better answers for you. But frankly, this team is just going to have to continue to do what guys talked about. Like Zach Wheeler talked about it. Trey Turner talked about it. Rob Thompson talked about it. There's one way out. You just got to keep showing up every day, believing you're good enough, putting in the work, doing your process, and then hoping for the results. At the end of the day, you can only prepare as much as you can prepare, and then go out there, and baseball will tell you if you're good enough. And if you're not, maybe you need to work harder, but there is a point where working harder isn't enough. Like, there are slumps like this where you just have to trust that what you're doing is going to pay dividends eventually. Like this series, especially the past 2 games, there have been balls smoked at people, and the Phillies just haven't been rewarded for it. Balls that should have been hits. Bryce Harper should have had a walk-off hit last night. DJ LeMahieu dives. It goes off his glove. It goes right to Gleyber Torres somehow and flips it to the pitcher, and the next thing you know, it should have been walk-off hit or error, becomes an out that ends the inning, ends up being part of the reason you lost the game. Like, they're in just such a bad spot with the baseball gods, the baseball fans, the sport of baseball. It's got to get better from here, right? That's all for today's episode of Locked On Phillies, folks. Tomorrow, we're going to have a little bit of an overarching view of some things, not as pointed, not as critical, more of just a, okay, let's make sure we're still alive here. A little bit of inventory we'll do tomorrow ahead of the West Coast road trip and the start of a new month with August 1st being tomorrow. It's crazy how fast this summer is gone. But thank you so much for checking out this episode. Once again, we come to you as part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please make sure your rating, reviewing, subscribing to the YouTube, all that great stuff that really helps us out here on Locked On Phillies. I would really appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, cross your fingers, folks. I'll talk to you next time on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.